All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Motoring Minds. My name is Adam Bernard, founder at Auto Perspectives and president of the Society of Automotive Analysts. And I'm here today with our special guest, Frank Markus. Frank is the technical director of MotorTrend and has one of the most entertaining bios I've seen from the MotorTrend website. He tells us he started critiquing cars at age 5 by bumming rides home from church and other parishioners' new cars. At age 16, he started running parts for an Olds dealership and got hooked on the car biz. And so he got a couple of mechanical engineering degrees and joined Chrysler, where he worked on the Neon, the legendary LH cars, and the second-gen minivans. And then he heard about an opening for a technical editor at Car Magazine, and he says he did the car biz equivalent of running off to join the circus. He loved that job until the phone rang again with what turned out to be a better opportunity with MotorTrend, which is where he is now. And he says it's nearly impossible to imagine an even better job, but I still answer the phone. So welcome aboard, Frank. Great to have you here. Frank and I, by the way, have known each other for like 25 years. So we've done this kind of Siskel and Ebert thing before. Because Frank's expertise, he's the technical editor of MotorTrend. If you've read his column, he talks about all sorts of cool technology. So the goal here is to spend about 30 minutes talking about some of the latest, coolest things happening from a technology standpoint in the automotive world. So we got a list of things to go through. We're probably not going to get to it all. If you think folks are going to enjoy this, it is being recorded, so it'll get posted to the SAA site, LinkedIn, etc. And with that, we'll dive right into it. Hot topic these days is electrification. Don't worry, we will be discussing internal combustion as well. A lot of folks have said that, you know, with an electric vehicle, like a motor is a motor is a motor. You don't get all the variety you get with internal combustion. But over the recent past year or so, we've seen like Mercedes, Ferrari, Lamborghini coming up with what they call or launching axial flux motors. So, Frank, what's the point of doing an axial flux motor?
Steel flux is great for a thin form factor. If you want to squish a motor in between, in the wheel especially, or in between a motor and a transmission, it's great for that. Think of it as like an Oreo cookie. So the white is the magnets and so forth, and the stators are the black part. So very thin, whereas your typical radial flux is more like a rugelach or something. So everything is more round and more out this way. So it's great for putting the leverage out farther because they're usually a higher diameter so that you get the leverage of those magnets out farther. So they're great for that and for being, like I say, really thin.
So downsides?
Well, I mean, you can't generally, it's harder to restrain those magnets. They're like glued onto some kind of a thing. And so they will fling off at super duper fast speed. So if you want to really spin a motor very, very fast, you want like some of the latest, big Teslas and so forth, like a carbon fiber wrap around those Rugelach magnets keeps them in. So you can tend to run those a little faster.
Now, have you driven any of the axial flux motors like the AMG or the Ferrari 296 or the Lamborghini?
Sad to say, I don't think I have driven any of those. One that's really cool and that will be likely coming to a European manufacturer. I don't know where they are in their reveal journey, so I can't say, but you can look for it. Orbis Halo Drive, which is an axial flux where they've actually used plastic for their stator, and they combine it with a planetary gear set. And so so this is a wheel motor, because that's always the problem. With a wheel motor, there's no transmission. So your torque is what your torque is. But with these guys, they put a little planetary transmission right in the wheel, and depending on changing the ratio of that and your ratio of permanent magnets you can even have cheap rare free magnets. You can get whatever torque you end up wanting to have. And so they're going to be using that to electrify products that are already out there. In fact, if I said the name of it, you'll think of one that you'd love, a front drive car this could be added to the rear to give you an e-rev and a power boost. And they're going to the plan is to make an aftermarket kit for that after they're in production. So fingers are firmly crossed on that.
And in-wheel motors, to remind folks, that's what Lordstown had on the Endurance pickup for the short time that those were being built, because nobody else really has in-wheel motors in production, I think, at the moment.
Um, and certainly not a production car, no.
Yeah,
But of
just
course,
some
it was the
concepts.
first electric vehicle, right? The Porsche, the loaner Porsche in 1890,
Oh, sure.
whatever. You know, the first hybrid.
Everything,
You know,
everything, everything old is new again. All right, so going from motors to batteries, the big things we hear about NMC batteries, and then more recently lithium iron phosphate, which are kind of the lower cost alternatives. But the two other chemistries that have started to emerge, because people are worried about safety and they're worried about fires and they're worried about elements and mining and whatever. So sodium ion, and then the newer one, which I just recently heard about, was lithium manganese rich, or LMR. So tell us a little about what those chemistries do and what they bring to the party.
yeah, well, NMC is the gold standard right now, and nickel, manganese, cobalt. It's the manganese and the cobalt. The nickel and the cobalt are the most expensive parts of that. So lithium manganese rich is just we're bringing down the amount of nickel and cobalt. So whereas they might usually be like 85% nickel, 10% manganese, 5% cobalt, LMR, which GM and I think Ford also are working on, is like 2% nickel, or sorry, 2% cobalt, 60 to 70% manganese, and then whatever, the 28 to 38%, the rest of it being nickel. And it brings you most of what LFP will do for price, but retains a lot of the energy density of NMC. So you're getting, a discount on NMC quite a bit without all of the losses there. Also, the first ones, at least at GM, are prismatic; they're not pouch, which is sort of better for packaging a little bit. Also, maybe a little bit faster charging, better in the cold, that sort of thing. Sodium ion is another one where yeah, it's about 25% less energy dense than NMC. So that's you're into the LFP density, the lithium iron phosphate. But of course, iron is 1,000 times more plentiful than, I mean, sodium rather, than lithium. So it could have the cost. And the fire danger for batteries, what makes them so hard to put out of fire is that the oxygen they need is in the battery. It's already in there. That's why blankets don't work and water doesn't work. That's why they're so hard. And so LFP doesn't have the oxygen in there like that, and neither does sodium ion. So both of those are kind of naturally safer.
Oh, okay. So both of those chemistries are more aimed at kind of mid to low end of the market. The holy grail that we keep hearing about, that people keep promising and never delivering yet, is solid state. And that's supposed to be faster charging, safer, better energy density, longer lifespan, et cetera. I remember seeing the motorbike folks, the Donut Labs at CES this year, which still have yet to deliver a bike and may have been not entirely truthful in some of their videos about their, yeah.
I think
So
someone's going to jail there. I'm not
yeah,
sure, but
I think to the, yeah, $25 million worth of fundraising. But there are other legitimate companies who are working on solid state. So how close do you think we are? Or are we still like really far away?
well, solid state is not like pregnant. There's a little solid state, and then there's really solid
Yeah.
state. The solid states that you're hearing about now, and then which have gone to production in China, NIO has already built like a few hundred batteries that way. SAIC has built some also, but those are semi-solid state. So the big problem with a fully solid is to have the electrolyte and the separator in contact tightly enough with the electrodes on either end. And something liquidy or jelly is better for keeping that tight connection. So that's one of the problems. Another problem is generally with those fully solid state things, there's a volumetric change. It's like somehow when electrons go into a solid state thing, they take up space, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, they change their stack height. And quite often they
Oh,
need a certain pressure to really work. So you have to build your battery pack with like springs or hydraulic
oh,
things or whatever to take up that space and maintain a solid pressure. So those full solid state batteries, those are a little further off. We're still kind of on a 5 to 10 year thing on that. Now, Taiwan's Prologium has come up with some SF ceramion, a super fluidized, all inorganic lithium ceramic that acts like a solid, except near the electrodes. So, that shows a lot of progress, but I think that still sort of probably falls in that semi-solid state situation. But a lot to keep an eye on. I maybe not a lot to throw your investment dollars behind just yet.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know within China, I remember reading that because of, like, even you can buy an MG now with a semi-solid state battery, but it sounds like the Chinese government is kind of cracking down on the terminology because, like you said, semi-solid is like being, half pregnant. And I think they want the automakers to come up with a different term for that, so it's not misleading people into thinking
Right.
it is all the benefits of a full solid state battery.
And they do still, even those ones have a lot of the same benefits, the super fast charging and, a lot of them work really well at the lower temperatures and so forth. So it's not totally disingenuous, but it is not the final solid state situation. Those are also, generally speaking, much better for fire also. Again, we don't have that oxygenated component in there that feeds a fire.
Yeah, yeah. And I know that I think Dodge has been testing solid state in the Charger Daytona. I think there's a Mercedes EQS out there that set some records. Nissan, I think, is still allegedly targeting around 2028. But I think even Toyota has said, if they do get this out by 2030, it'll be like tens of thousands of units a year, not
Right.
hundreds of thousands of units.
Right.
Because the
And probably
manufacturer.
high-end cars, where people are willing to pay. Yes, I want the high range and the super fast charging, so I'll pay more, and then we'll trickle it down to the other cars later.
The mainstream stuff. Cool, cool, very cool. All right, let's shift gears. Over the past year or so, we have seen the return of the Hemi. We have seen General Motors invest in a new V8. We have seen a bunch of EV programs get tossed to the side of the road. Some good, some bad. So internal combustion is back in style. If you look at, gas prices being what they are, it's boosted EV sales in Europe, but in the US, it's boosted hybrid sales. But we're probably not at the end of the road for, like, optimizing hybrids. What's new there?
Underestimate engineers' ability to figure something out to solve whatever the problem. A fella whose last name is Engineer, Nyan Engineer, has been showing off a product that he's developed for Saudi's Aramco. And of course, these guys are in the gas business, so they have an oar in the water for keeping combustion going. And he went and said, "Hey, if we were looking for the ideal hybrid engine today, what would that look like?" Because I think that's kind of what Toyota did for hybrid synergy drive way back when. So he attacked every little aspect of, let's get the price down. Let's look at the fact that when you've got some pretty good electrification on board, the car doesn't need to have super low end torque. Motors are great for that. Doesn't have to have super high end, power because, we've got other means on board for that. So when you take out those duty cycles, you can have a very simple engine. So he's got this family of engines that they're designing that are cam and block, good old push rods and overhead valves. It's a monoblock, one casting for the head and the block, saves a ton of money and saves a ton of parts. To get the friction down as low as possible, they put a little bit of money back in with a roller bearing crank, cam, and rods. So there's some money, but that really builds up the efficiency. And then it's a neat design because it's made for front drive mostly and has a little planetary transmission and two motors on each end of the crankshaft, one for each wheel. So you're saving the differential and a bunch of other things like that. And now that you do have four motors, but they can be much smaller, lower permanent magnet loading, and so forth. That engine, his 1.6 liter three-cylinder inline, has only 175 parts. And I don't know exactly what the three-cylinder turbo, currently powering a lot of GM cars has, but it's probably more like 1,000, I would think. So
Wow.
that's a big deal. And I'm very much, my fingers are crossed that one comes to market. He's got a four-cylinder, a V6. I think he's got a two-cylinder. It's a whole family that they've imagined.
Wow. So right now to the best of our knowledge, they're shopping around for an OEM to license that so they can drop it into something.
Exactly. And or maybe horse powertrain buys it. I don't know. Somebody like that should. And he also pointed out that you could, turn it around and put it in the middle of a car and drive two differentials for all-wheel drive or very simple all-wheel drive. So,
Ah, okay. Interesting. I'm going to go a little off script because we didn't talk about this ahead of time, but I'm curious, have you driven the Nissan e-Power, the series hybrid at all?
no.
No.
But it's very much like the Mitsubishi, their Outlander PHEV or whatever was always that sort of an idea. It is
Oh,
not
okay.
the same exact stuff because that's what I thought of it. Wasn't that the point of buying Mitsubishi? You can, the
Use their
closet
own.
of all the hybrid stuff is there, but no, they made their own. But no, I don't believe I have been in that one yet.
Okay, because yeah, Nissan is supposed to be launching that in the US soon. It's already been in Europe and Japan for a while. So
Yeah.
we'll have to wait and see what that looks like when it gets here.
Japanese trips go to my colleagues in California.
Okay. You have to wait for the Rogue to show up here in person. So one of the big debates you hear in the industry these days, especially around electric vehicles, is what should they sound like? And obviously naturally they don't make any noise at all. And people have been looking at different opportunities. We when the Charger concept was first shown, they talked about the Fratsonic exhaust and the giant pipe organ and getting it sounding like a Hellcat. I mean, what's your personal thoughts? What should an EV sound like?
Um, I've driven a lot of cars that give you a menu. Would you like this sound like this? Of course, the names they give all the sounds are serious eye rollers. Personally, I think most of them sound kind of dumb. A lot of them go for that sort of Tron, e-bike noise or whatever. But Ferrari will argue with one thing you said there that electric motors make no noise. They absolutely do make noise, and as we talked about, the
Oh, yeah.
Luce is looking to lean into that and putting microphones down, and they're going to, amplify that natural sound of the electric motors. And hey, I'm eager to hear what it sounds like. I will say that it does make the car more fun, and certainly in the case of like the Hyundai Ioniq 5N, which is a car that is fun to drive on a track. I mean, I think it's because they go further and, of course, simulate gear shifts and all this other stuff, which is okay. But sometimes, if especially for the generation of people that are out there now who have only driven, ICE vehicles on track for the most part, there is an auditory sense that gives you helps you set up for a turn and so forth. And our editor who drove the Ioniq 5N on a track in California did say that he felt like he went faster around when he had all that on, and he could you'd use your ears and whatever to set up for the turn rather than when it was just totally quiet and with none of that fake gear shift stuff. So I think it has some merit.
Yeah, yeah. I just read about the Bentley Torcal, the new electric vehicle they're showing, let's see, September 23rd, and the notion of using musical instruments to recreate the sound of an internal combustion V8. And I think it's different.
I mean, Bentley got a Bentley.
Yeah,
They're charging a lot more for that car. You've got to be a little creative about how you spend it sometimes.
yeah. Have you experienced the AMG, the simulation there? The
No.
no. Now, what about the other thing that some of the EVs you mentioned this with the Ioniq 5N is transmissions. Over the weekend I saw Lincoln LS with a stick shift, and we all know how rare those were. And but is there hope for people that like to row their own? It seems like there's a couple of unusual ideas floating around out there.
Well, as long as you're not shy about paying for it, there are going to be options for that. I mean, I think we talked about how Ferrari is offering a total fakey, it's got a little gear shifter and everything like this, but it's all just hooked up to electrons and it's all just making simulations and it's running a regular 8-speed DCT under the hood somewhere and there's a clutch and whatever. Okay, I mean Ferraris, you can't always just charge for lamb's wool headliners. You can put electronic things in there too. Why not? Okay. It's a little. I did drive the Lexus a Lexus prototype that was an electric car, a fully electric car with a shifter and with a clutch. And I mean, if you dump the clutch, it would stall. And you
Really?
had to put your foot back on the clutch and push the button again, and the fake engine noise would come back on, and you could drive off again. And if you went first to sixth, it would lug and it would give you this noise and these vibrations and so forth. And like,
Really?
okay, I mean, there will be children born today that would drive that and go, when they get to 16, like, why is this doing this? What in the world why is this?
Did,
But
did it
okay.
did it have like a fake tack or anything to tell you when to shift? Or
Um, I'm trying to remember now. This is an early prototype. I
okay.
think they were talking about they would do something about that. It might have been just like old Volkswagens where they made marks on the speedometer where you were supposed to,
Oh yeah, yeah.
shift.
Okay. Well, that would work too.
Yeah.
I didn't learn to drive a stick shift until I was 24, but I know now. So hopefully I'll continue to remember. All right, well, let's switch gears as it were, and we'll go under the car and talk about suspension stuff. Now, I remember 30 something years ago watching the Infinity Q45 with the active suspension leaning into a turn, and then nothing happened for a while. But then in the past couple of years, we've started to see, now the computers have gotten smaller and faster, whatever. We start to see active suspension and all sorts of cool stuff come back into the market.
Huh. Well, my most vivid memory was of the Bose car, which it had a steeplechase function. It came down and it leapt over a thing that was in the road, unbeknownst to anybody. It was a big surprise. And that was an electromagnetic suspension. So
Oh,
picture, if you will, a gigantic doorbell thing, the thing that goes over and goes ding dong. It was one of those, just scaled up and turned this way, and it would
oh,
push down or pull back up on the wheel. And it turns out apparently that it was never going to work for a car. They did actually put it into production for the suspension of a semi driver's seat. But a company in Boston named Clear Motion, acquired all the IP for that, and they're sort of redoing it, but in an electro-hydraulic mode. So
oh,
a lot of the same switching technology, because all the sensing and that we need to go this way or that way, all that from the Bose, but now we're using very high-speed pumps and pumping fluid to move the thing up or down as needed. And it has gone into production in the Neo ET9, their big
oh, yeah.
luxury car, their like S-Class 7 Series thing. And it's called Skyride. And I was over there, I got to drive it in China. And I also got to watch some people watching a movie in the back seat. There was a 3D sense around mode and these guys were driving cars over, they were jumping and all this stuff, and the ET9 was doing all that along with it. It was pretty impressive, and it did feel great when you turned that on and drove over speed bumps and so forth. It just melted them away. So
Wow. I
yeah,
know
very cool.
I've seen, if you for our viewers here, if you look online for the Neo ET9, the official video shows it like doing a slalom course with champagne glasses on the hood, like the old Lexus ad, but they're doing a lot more stuff than the Lexus was able to do just
Yeah.
driving down the road. So
Yeah.
it's a
And
pretty
then,
impressive.
the Purosangue is doing a similar thing, only they've got electric ball screws. So a little circular thing with a ball ramp, and that's what makes theirs go up and down. So there are more than, one way to skin a cat. If you just want to make a suspension go up and down, there's lots of ways to do that. I've talked about some other ones that come out of the aerospace area and whatever. There's a lot of stuff to keep an eye on in that space for sure.
Now, what about, we've seen some automakers make big upgrades to their electronic architectures to enable some of the faster computing and faster processing and better over the air. And we referred zonal and everything like that.
Yeah,
I mean, that also obviously has an ability to add more capability or suspension too,
sure.
right?
A lot of cars today are like a big giant game of telephone. So we buy a sensor and it talks to the ECU that it came with, and then it sends a message up to the main central controller, and then it goes back and says, okay, do this or whatever. And you take out that game of telephone when you have a centralized compute, everything a high-speed communication bus or two or three on board, like BMW's Neue Klasse. Very impressive there. And it allows them to get the latency down from like 10 or 15 milliseconds, very fast, whatever, today's kind of state of the art, down to 1 millisecond.
Wow.
And so all of a sudden, especially with the electric noise classes, where the electric motors are like an actuator, you ask for forward actuation or retard actuation, and there you can degrees of turn you can really control. And so they figure out exactly what the friction level is at each corner. And I drove it on a morning with a lot of dew and whatever, and we'd turn it off, and they said, "I'll just drive through there," and you couldn't believe how little grip there was. But this thing just found what there was with that incredible control, and it also enables what they call like a limo stop, where when you come to a stop, you cannot feel. They blindfolded us on a proving ground and said, "You tell me when it has stopped," and it was way after that I said stop.
Really?
Yeah, it was really impressive, and you cannot do it manually. I have never been able to stop like that.
Wow. So that's what BMW calls the heart of joy. That's their new system, which
Right,
very appropriate for BMW. Excellent.
exactly.
Excellent. We'll finish up talking about some safety stuff. I'm sure most of us have experienced automatic emergency braking in one form or another, either really helping us or sometimes kicking in by accident. And I actually did not know that there is an FMVSS requirement to get that into every vehicle in the US by September of 29. But obviously there's some technologies being developed to help make that all happen in a cost-effective manner.
Right, right. Well, a lot of it is seeing down the road. And there's a big debate, do you need radar? Do you need LiDAR? Do you need whatever? And so LiDAR is more expensive than radar. And so there are moves being made to make radar cheaper. So there's one called TerRadar that is, it's radar, but it's at the terahertz frequency, which is closer to light. It's not quite there, but it gives you a lot better resolution than regular radar. But while the chips and so forth are still fairly cheap like radar. So that's one to keep an eye on there. And then there's on the LiDAR side, the best LiDAR is this frequency modulated continuous wave, right? And this place called Scantinel has figured out silicon photonics so that they can print this whole thing on a chip. So Microvision is bringing that technology way down in price. Now it's not at flash LiDAR yet, but this one allows you to sense the speed as well as the distance, which is usually what you're kind of missing in most of the LiDAR. You get a points cloud, and yeah, sometimes you can integrate when the point cloud is moving, but this gives you point instant velocity as well as, so that's cool. And then Atomathic is another thing. They call it AI-DAR. So they take regular radar, which goes out into the world and bounces all over, and a zillion reflections come back. And their AI looks at all those reflections and goes, "Hey, wait a minute, this could be this." And so they showed, I've seen where like a UPS truck is here, big hard target. You can see that bright as day. Little UPS man standing next to it in a cloth outfit, with no reflection. And this thing figures it out. It sees them both. So that's another thing where, and again, that's computing. That's not hardware. So the price is down at, whatever you pay for the IP.
Wow. Wow. Very cool. So we'll hit one more thing before we sign off here, and talk about interior sensors. I can remember years ago when Volvo had the heartbeat sensor, you don't leave your kid behind in the car. And we started to see some more sophisticated stuff to make sure you don't leave a person or a pet or package behind. But there's even more capable hardware coming out too.
Yeah, and it's still scary how many incidents of kids left behind still happen. But this place, Trinamics, everyone's got the driver monitoring cameras. They're going to be ubiquitous here soon. And they say if you just add this little sensor in there, or the little projector to put a dot matrix of infrared dots into the interior, it can read the infrared coming back from those, and it can generate and figure out heart rate and respiration rate and presence, and whether someone's sitting there at all or if they're out of position, all that kind of thing, which really gives you a lot better data for the interior active safety stuff to work with. So it's a lot better. And then like we had talked about, if you do detect that a driver has gone unconscious or something, the car can pull over or whatever. So it's that sort of thing too. And then, some like Volvo is looking to take information from sensors like that and all the other ones that are out there and train their multi-adaptive belts to have much more fine tailoring to the belt force. The automatic seatbelt retractors, have them go a little gentler and maybe release a little whatever. Right now, they have about 3 patterns that they can use on that, depending if it's a big, small, or medium person. And they're going to go to 11, which so much finer, resolution of who's in the seat.
Wow. Wow. Well, we're at the end of our time here. I'm sure that our viewers hopefully have been entertained and educated. It's a little like drinking from a fire hose because you are a font of information. So I want to thank you for joining us today. Any closing thoughts on kind of the state of the business?
I mean, I'm just happy to have spent 23 years looking for and reporting on how engineers are making motoring better. And I hope to keep doing for a little while. Check it out on MotorTrend.com.
Yes, you look for Frank there. If you want more information on SAA, visit us at SAAauto.com. And we look forward to our next episode of Motoring Minds. Frank, thank you for joining me and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks for having me.